Next, we're going to talk about positional mount control. My opponent's going to be on her back. Head that way, feet this way. My opponent's on her back, and there's basically 3 different positions in mount. There's a low mount, where I'm mounted across her hips, which is fantastic for attacks. A mid mount, which is even better for attacks. And then a high mount, which is fantastic for positional mount control. So we're going to talk about all 3 and how to achieve those and what we're looking for when we're in the mount. Anytime I'm in a mounted position, whether it's low mount, mid mount, or high mount, I'm always focused on one thing. I'm focused on my feet. The closer I can keep my feet to my opponent, the better position that I have, or the more opportunity that I have to maintain a mounted position. If I can slide my feet under my opponent, I'm in business, because then I can use my hands to stabilize, or I can turn their head, and I'll show you that in a minute, to stabilize my position. So the first one we're going to talk about is the low mount. Let's turn this way. So in the low mount, it's just that. I'm going to be over the hips here, okay? I'm going to be somewhat controlling the head for the most part, but mainly I'm focused on what my feet are doing. So when I'm mounted here, I'm going to drop my knees behind my opponent's hips here, and then I'm going to lock up my feet. Notice that my knees are no longer on the mat. What this allows me to do is drive a lot of pressure into my opponent. So I'm driving, lifting her legs up and driving my hips in to her diaphragm. The reason I want to do that is, number one, I know my wife has to pee. But the other reason is I need her to panic in order for me to gain a position for an attack.
You're so rude.
You're welcome. So I have control here, and now to maintain control, I can either use my hands to post, or I can take away her ability to bridge. Right now, believe it or not, she still has a pretty good position. So if she decides to bump, she can move me, she can turn me. So if I take away her ability to bridge by cupping the head and pulling it towards my chest, now when she goes to bridge, it's very little opportunity to overtake, okay? So I want to make sure that I'm able to control my opponent and easily stabilize my position and drive my hips in. Next one I'm going to talk about is the high mount. Mid mount's about the same as the low mount, same position. But in the high mount, what I want to do is I want to get her elbows as high on her body as possible. So if I can slide my way all the way up here, this is a great high mount position. Because if she tries to bump, if she tries to bridge, there's no effect to me at all. If she tries to push with her arms, she can't, because her elbows are up high. If I slide down even a little bit, she's able to push down with her elbows and reestablish a good position to where she can bridge and get out, okay? So I want to establish a low mount, work my way to a high mount for positional mount control. So how do we get from low mount to high mount? Let's turn this way. Getting from low mount to high mount is actually pretty simple, but it requires a reaction from my opponent, okay? So if I'm here and I start attacking collars and she reaches up to defend, I can slide my knees up into a high mount easily. If she's stubborn and she keeps her elbows in, I've got to create the opportunity at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on her shoulders. All of my body weight is going to be going forward, okay? Almost like I'm trying to break my nose on the mat. So I lean forward and I slide my knees up. What that does is as I push her shoulders down, her elbows lift. When her elbows lift, I slide my knees up. So here, I push down and I almost catch myself at the end. One last component that I want to talk about. One last component that I want to talk about for positional mount control, let's turn to her side, is if I'm in high mount and Amy's pretty strong, so when she decides she's going to push down with her elbows and use her body to slide in that direction, she can do it. Go and get me in a low mount, okay? So how do I maintain the high mount and not end up in low mount? Let's turn this way a little bit. So when I'm in high mount, I'm going to take the arch of my feet and I'm going to find her hip bones and I'm going to dig my feet into her hip bones. So when she starts to push and move, she has to fight against her own body to do so. And it's really easy for me to maintain that position. And that's how we maintain positional mount control.